Alright guys, today we are going to look at the actual war part of our standard. We're going to look at the significance of certain people in the standard. We're going to talk about the Loyalists, Patriots, Elijah Clark, Austin Dabney, Nancy Hart, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton, the Battle of Kettle Creek, and the Siege of Savannah. Alright, I've already told y'all that Georgia was the baby colony, so they didn't want to make the king mad, but at this point they were pretty fed up with everything, so they decided to go ahead and let's go gung-ho on everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and start looking at the people of the Revolution. Alright guys, you've got to remember, you have the British, or England on one side, and then you have the colonists on the other. And everybody should remember that all of the colonists were fighting for was independence. Okay, it's pretty important that you remember this, guys. Independence. They wanted to be free and clear of King George III. All right. On the British side of things, you have the British Army, which were called redcoats. Okay, they all wore red coats. Obviously, that was a big deal because if you think about it, they're over here fighting, and they're fighting in the woods and things like that, and they were very easy to see. It's almost like they had a target on their back. So that was the British Army. Loyalists, on the other hand, those were the colonists who lived here, who were a part of the 13 colonies, but they still wanted to remain loyal to the crown. Okay, and they did that for several different reasons, which we don't really have to get into, but that's what they did. They were remaining loyal to the king. On the colonist side, they were called patriots. Okay, and these were the guys that wanted to break free from the King of England. We really look at them being led by George Washington. Okay, y'all know George Washington, and we'll talk more about him later. Okay. Just make sure that you know, if you ever hear anybody refer to people as Tories, these are the guys, these are those loyalists, okay? The redcoats, again, were the British soldiers. Again, you can see that they have red coats. They were also referred to as lobsterbacks, obviously because lobsters were red, okay? All right, let's look at the Patriots, okay? These guys, like we said, they wanted to break ties with Great Britain. Some of the names that they went by were Whigs, Colonials, Sons of Liberty. These were the guys that were really stirring up people's attitudes and things towards getting away from the king. And then, of course, the Liberty Boys, and these were the guys that were in Georgia. Okay. Nancy Hart. Nancy Hart, guys, we're not quite sure if she was exactly a true character, but basically what she supposedly did is she had Tories come to her home, and at this point these were loyalists who were fighting for the British, but they came to her home and they decided that they needed to have food, and so she brought them in, she was feeding them, and while that was going on, she was slyly sneaking their guns away, and then ended up holding them at gunpoint until help could arrive. She did end up killing 1 to 2 of the men. We're not quite sure, but basically, because of this story, she is named a hero of the Revolutionary War. She is the only woman to have a county named after her, and that's going to be Hart County. Hart County is actually in northeast Georgia. So anyway, again, we're not quite sure if her story is true or not, but it sounds like it could be, but who knows. Anyway, so that was Nancy Hart. Now, after the Declaration of Independence was signed, there was the bigger battles began. Just so you know, though, before the Declaration was ever even sent to King George. There was actually a couple of smaller battles that were fought, which actually started the war. The Declaration of Independence just intensified it very much. It was called Lexington and Concord, and basically they had someone, they're not quite sure which side shot first, but someone shot, and it was called the shot heard around the world because nobody knew where it came from, and it actually started the fighting. Okay, basically, guys, either way, you still need to know that the American Revolution is fought because the colonists wanted their independence. All right, they were struggling with the fact that here you have this king sitting high up on his throne across the sea, trying to make the calls and make the shots, or call the shots for everything that was going on in the colonies, when they were the ones that were over here doing the work and taking care of themselves. Okay, so you have the Loyalists, the Redcoats, versus the Patriots. And remember, they were fighting for what? What were they fighting for? Cricket, cricket, cricket. Independence. Okay. Now, in Georgia, John Reynolds, not John Reynolds, James Wright. He was the last royal governor that Georgia had. Okay. They actually kicked him out, which was all great, fine, and dandy, until the British came back and they basically came in and took over Savannah. Now, why is this bad for Savannah? Well, when you have the British controlling what comes in and out of your ports, you can't really do much for your colony. So, the Georgia wasn't looking so hot. Okay, British had come in, they were murdering colonists, they were burning towns, they were basically just causing chaos in the colony of Georgia. And Georgia's militia, which remember was a citizen army basically, they weren't very good. They were very weak, especially going up against such a strong army like the British. And of course, morale, when you're continuously beat down, your morale gets to be pretty low. If you'll remember, morale means your confidence. Okay, so their confidence was very low until February of 1779, when a Georgia rebel militia defeated over 800 British troops. Guys, of those of you who play sports or know much about different schools, this is kind of like the equivalent of, let's say, East Hall beating Buford. Okay, Buford is seen as a very top competitor. They're very strong, and so the Georgia militia came in and defeated these troops, and they were badly outnumbered. Now, what did this do? Even though this was not a major battle, it didn't have the impact on the outcome of the war or anything like that. What this did is it lifted Georgia's morale. Okay, now these guys feel like they can do something, they can accomplish something. Plus, it did give the militia badly needed guns, horses, ammunition, and supplies, things like that. And of course, because those British guys were defeated, the Loyalists in Georgia, they kind of decided, they're like, oh, well, maybe we should back off a little bit. Maybe we need to think twice about trying to enlist and fight these colonists. So now, like I said, it did lift their morale, which gave them the thought that, well, maybe we can take back over the city of Savannah. Okay, this right here was actually the Battle of Kettle Creek. What they did is they literally just surrounded the guys, the British soldiers, and just went from there. Okay, famous Georgians in the Battle of Kettle Creek. This was led by Elijah Clark, who was the colonel during that defeat. Okay, so he was a big deal because he helped to defeat the British. Austin Dabney actually was a slave. He took the place of his white owner in the Battle of Kettle Creek. While he was there, he actually helped to save the life of Elijah Clark, which obviously helped us out because we got that defeat, or we defeated the British. So these two guys are pretty important. Elijah Clark obviously has a county named after him Clark County. Austin Dabney was supposed to get land for fighting in the war. There was a huge debate as to whether or not he would get it because he was a slave, but ultimately he won out and did receive land in Madison County, which is just right down the road from us. Okay, so the Siege of Savannah, like I told you, Savannah had been taken over by the British, and because the troops had defeated the British soldiers at the Battle of Kettle Creek, these guys kind of felt like, well, maybe it was time for them to try to take back Savannah, and they did. They partnered up with the French, and they came over in September of 1779. 22 French ships, 4,000 French soldiers on top of 15,000 American troops, and they laid siege to Savannah. They basically came in trying to regain Savannah. This only lasted 45 minutes. That is not a whole lot of time. But in that 45 minutes, the Siege of Savannah failed. It was a failed attempt to take over Savannah and take it back from the British. What this meant was that Savannah was going to stay under the control of the British for another 3.5 years, up until the war was over. Okay? Is this a big deal? Yeah, because of course it doesn't help the colony much when it comes to supplies and things like that. Okay. Now we basically, guys, the end of the American Revolution, it was fought for 5 years. All right. The Patriots did end up defeating the English. The French were a key ally, or was a key ally for us. They came in and really helped us to muscle down and defeat the British. What did that mean? Well, it meant that we gained our independence. Okay. Now, we have gained our independence. We are free from Great Britain. We had already created an army. We had already created a government. But now we have to figure out how to work together as a new nation. And we have to figure out how to work our government as one. Is this going to be an easy task? No. And we'll talk more about that in our next unit. But just know that it's coming to a point to where there's going to be some mistakes that have to be fixed. There's going to have to be some things looked at, because sometimes that first try to government isn't that great. Okay, and so that's going to be the next step in this whole journey to becoming a free country. Okay. All right, guys, what you're going to do now is you're going to finish working on your lit circle. You need to make sure that your tombstones are getting worked on. Make sure that you are including the name of the person that you have chosen. You are including the dates that they were born and died, and of course I'll put those on the board for you. And then you're telling me the impact that he or she made during the Revolutionary time. Okay. Construction paper, again, is up front. You'll need to use probably white crayons, which will be found in the back, or white color pencils. Please make sure that if you're cutting things out, that you are picking up your scrap paper. And other than that, guys, y'all just enjoy, be good, and I will see y'all tomorrow.